Hello, world. This is the Know Your Place podcast, and this is episode 62. On this week's episode, I thought I'd take a minute to talk about what I like about where I live. So let's get into it. Yes, where I live, Vine Grove, Kentucky, has been called the safest city in the entire state of Kentucky, and that's a pretty high honor to be called the safest city. You know, we only got 6,000 people, so that kind of helps. But uh, so yeah, I want to talk a little bit about what makes a city feel safe. So obviously here, part of what I don't feel any concern about walking around the streets at night. You know, and obviously you could say that about a dangerous place, I guess, if you're heavily armed. But I don't feel like I need to be heavily armed. And let's see what else. It's just a sort of. It feels like you can just say hello to anyone on the street. People in a way are pretty open here. It's not stupidly open. But people are just they're friendly. Everybody waves at everyone. They're not. You feel like you could just hop over and borrow somebody's. Like my next door neighbor offered for me to borrow their tractor. Or I mean, not the tractor. Their zero turn lawnmower. I didn't know how to operate, so I didn't borrow it. But they just left it there. They don't, you know. I'm not sure how that works other places, and I'm not saying obviously that I don't take any precautions. That I don't ever lock my doors or things like that. But in a way, this reminds me a lot of what it was like when I was really little, and I still lived in Wisconsin, north of Milwaukee, and sort of where I go back and visit. Up there, people are very friendly, doors wide open. Just um, it's I don't know how to describe it. It's a different kind of mindset, and that's not to say there aren't people who've had their problems. Like my parents' hometown had its first shooting in a long time, like 20 years, and it's always. I mean, I feel super safe there. Or I thought I did. No, I still feel super safe there. I'm not too worried about it. It's probably a fluke thing that happened once, but uh, it's 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 almost like it is a bit of a mentality, right? I think a lot of times part of this safety issue, I don't know how to describe it, the fear and feeling unsafe. And obviously, the safety thing, I'm not just saying this based on, we didn't just win like some poll or something. It's statistically the lowest crime in the state by all metrics. But it's, I think part of it is less of a fear of your neighbors. And how I say that is, you know, if you're in constant fear of your neighbors, I feel like more crime is committed. I know this is kind of crazy to say, like, obviously, crime is crime. But, like, for instance, if, let's say, like, in my parents' hometown, like, I knew one time that some people who lived near my grandparents, their house was starting to fall apart a bit. So people came to their house and helped them fix it up, you know? And you may say, well, that's not such a big deal, but it is, right? Because let's say they didn't fix up their house, that doesn't. And I'm not saying that that completely solved all those people's problems or anything, but it made them feel part of the community, so it made them feel less like they had nothing to lose or abandon the community, And unfortunately, I feel like in modern society, we've kind of gotten away from that a bit. And I don't know how to say it, but when I first, so I was interviewing for jobs, and I took the one here, and this was the first part of the. So this is like one city in a county, and it's like one out of like five, and this was the first city I came to when I crossed the county line here, and I made a wrong turn and drove through here to the office of where I took the job I eventually got, and when I drove through here, I was like, man, this looks like a picturesque, quaint little town that I'd like to live in. Lo and behold, little did I know, after So after we lived here for about 6 or 7 months, we started house hunting, and I tried to look everywhere else but here, really, because I didn't think I'd be able to get a house here. So I looked like everywhere else in the area but here first, and I ended up just falling in love with here. And we were lucky that we happened to find a house in our range that just happened to come on the market, and I made an offer that day because I was like, I'm not fooling around. But yeah, I love this town. It's just very much. It feels like I don't know how many of my fans have watched the show Gilmore Girls. I brought this up before. It's not quite Stars Hollow, but it feels kind of like that. It feels like there's a bar on the main street. There's a barber shop, and I go in there and I get my hair cut, and it just I could go to Great Clips, and I was going to Great Clips for a while, like the national chain, but then I just stopped. And I'm like, it may take a little longer. It costs about the same, but I just like being around the people in my town and seeing what they're doing. You know, and or like my wife went to the pharmacist. We could get our prescriptions at Walmart. We could get them anywhere, but we went to the pharmacist here because, they you feel such a sense of the community here, and it's crazy because they're not what's really cool about a place like this, and like my parents' hometown, I think, is well, my parents' hometown, it's harder. They try it more because they're on Lake Michigan, so they do a bit of the tourist thing. But especially here, like the sense of community thing isn't forced at all. In fact, they downplay it really. Like the streets, it's not all that obvious when you cross into the boundaries of here, except from one direction. There's actually a decent sign, and then I guess from my work, you drive by and you see the water tower. But like, there's no the city hall isn't. It's kind of innocuous almost. I mean, it is on the main drag, and you do see it, but it's pretty innocuous except for the fact that it has a gazebo in front of it. The main intersection is a railroad crossing, and they just painted a mural on the streetcar, and they have a little tiny square with just a couple of benches. But it's not like they're trying to force it. Like there's another town near here, it's a bigger city called Elizabethtown, and uh, they're more trying to force an attitude or a culture. And here, it's just I don't know how to describe it. It's just super laid back. It's like hey, you can come do what you want. We're your neighbors. Let's all try and be kind of nice and respectful. And when we go to, we live within walking distance of a park, and every time we go down there, I'm just blown away by sort of, you know, it's not even the fanciest park in the world. It was built in the '70s, but it's just the people when they're there, it just it's just sort of real. I don't know how to say they're. I mean, there aren't. It's not like they're super ridiculously polite, but it's like, hey, just play around, let's just all be kind of chill, and it's really refreshing in today's day and age because I've lived in a lot of big cities. In fact, this is the smallest city I've ever lived in, ever. Now, it's not that far from a bigger city. It's only a 40-minute drive from Louisville. But I I just I in the bigger cities, even like okay, so when I was in middle school, I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we lived in a neighborhood called Village Lakes, and it had like a homeowners association thing, not a very expensive one, but still, it had a homeowners association, and the people we did feel, I mean, we were really close with some of our neighbors, but even there, it didn't feel quite like this, and granted, it wasn't as safe because it was in a bigger city and there's more crime, but that doesn't necessarily have to mean that it doesn't. New York City, for example, there's still crime in the Bronx and other places, but Manhattan, crime has gotten so low there that New York City was voted the largest safe city or the safest largest city by the safest large city by some metric. I forget what it was a couple years ago. And that goes to show you it's not necessarily about size, it's about an attitude and a culture. And I don't know. There was when I was in college, I was forced to read this book called The Life and Death of the Great American City. And I'm sure some of you have heard of this book. And when I was reading it, the the biggest thing that caught my eye was sort of the sidewalks and sitting on the porch thing and how the automobile killed that. And ironically enough, here, everybody still drives, obviously, but when I walk down the street and I go to the park or when I walk in, there are actually people out on their porches, and again, you can have that in the ghetto too. You can have that anywhere, but there's just something about uh, here where it's just like, yeah, I'm just comfortable here. Like you'll drive down the main street here when I drive to my office, and people will be sitting out in their porches, just chilling with their dogs, whatever, talking to people, and when you build that sense of community, like it was really interesting listening to the mayoral debates, and we went down here down in the little square. They shut it off, and they did a trick or treating thing in October, and it's just really interesting when you build this sense of when the sense of community happens in a organic way. Because a lot of times what I've seen, because I studied geography and urban planning, is I see people trying to force that, right? Oh, we're going to make a homeowners association, so then the people will do that, or we're going to make this commercial center that's an urban lifestyle center, and people are going to intermingle in the coffee shops and the apartments above. But when you go to a town like this one, or like my parents' hometown, or like a Stars Hollow type of town, it's almost an organic thing. It's not forced. There is no central planning committee in of Vine Grove that said, "Hey, we're going to lay our streets out like this, and people are going to want to be around each other. Or we're going to put our parks here." It just happened, you know, and that is so interesting to me as a geographer and somebody who studied the sort of urban planning side of it, because I think deep down, and I grew up playing SimCity, so I love that game. But I think deep down, a lot of us think that we can make the perfect SimCity. We can lay out the roads the perfect way, get the perfect growth in the perfect town. And I met somebody when I was still in college before I'd finished my degree and decided to go into geographic information systems instead of urban planning. I met somebody who was from northern Kentucky, where my parents live, and they were like, "Oh, well, if you go into urban planning, all your plans will be sitting on a shelf. All mine are sitting on a shelf and have never been implemented." And I sat a while, and at first I was really disheartened, but then I thought about that. And that was exactly her problem, right? Was they were her plans. She didn't look at the area as a community and as somewhere that built from the ground up, that had people. She looked at people as pawns, right? I mean, she looked at them as her great Sim City model. And I think we all wish we could be God and plan a city out. And there are some people who are probably better at urban planning than other people and do a pretty good job, right? But deep down at the end of the day, like here, you have to, it comes from the bottom up. It really does. There's just people who all say, I like living here. I like my neighbors. I want to live in a city where everybody feels comfortable walking around. If somebody has problems, we're going to find a way to help them solve their problems. And yeah, so that's why I think it's super safe here, and I just love the vibe, and I really hope to get more involved in I've done a few things around here, but I haven't done a lot yet. But I really hope to get more involved as my kids get a little older, because right now I have a toddler and a newborn, so I don't have much time for anything. But yeah, I love it here, and I love to say I do feel totally safe here. I generally just like talking to the strangers I meet on the street here, and I didn't feel that as much the last place I lived before here. Um, and I did feel it a bit when I was in college at UK, because at UK it feels like that kind of around UK, but it's changing. It's kind of going for the worst in some places. But here it was great. I just felt so comfortable here, and I still feel so comfortable here, and I love it. Anyway, let me know what you think about this concept of a safe city. What do you feel safe about? To me, and walking at night. Can a big city even be safe in your opinion? Where's the cutoff? Let me know what you all think, and thanks for listening to the podcast.